Welcome back to the Sherry Sylvester Show. Today we're going to talk to Ben Crockett. He's a political science major at Texas A&M. He's going to graduate in May, so I want to ask him about that. I knew Ben because he was an intern here at TPPF working on the Taxpayer Protection Project. He's also interned at States Trust and hosts a podcast at A&M. We're going to talk to him about that. But the reason Ben is here today is I asked my colleague, Sid Tice, who I've been working in the trenches with for the past 3 years in fighting DEI in higher education in Texas, who I should have on my podcast. And he said, you need to call Ben Crockett. Ben, welcome to the Sherry Sylvester Show. Why did Sid recommend you?
Well, Sid's full of a lot of incredible ideas, and we've had numerous conversations over the past couple months. And if I had to answer, it probably comes down to this project that A&M's been working on that I've had the pleasure of being a part of, called the Citizenship and Service Initiative. Mm-hmm. It's a initiative that's out of the Office of the President, and it centers around 4 main pillars that we think that students need to know to be competent, confident, and prepared citizens of the United States. And those 4 pillars are knowledge. You have to know what citizenship is. You need to know our history. Where did we come from? If you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going to go. But also, there's a certain civic character that we think students should have. You need to love our country. You need to understand our institutions. And then the other 2 pillars are skills and civic engagement. And skills are, we've been up in the Capitol a number of times. I saw you testify at the Higher Education Committee. And so frequently we find that people go to the Capitol, they go to their, City Hall, and they want something to change. But they don't know, well, how do I contact my representative? Or is this a representative issue or is this a city council issue? What level of government? And really that's about how government works and the skills you need to effectively engage with it. And then the final pillar that we have is civic engagement. And this is morphed several times. Originally we called it the service pillar. What we mean by that is you need to be following the news. You need to know what's going on in the world if you're going to be a competent citizen. And so that's really the project that me and Sid have been talking about over the last couple months. And if I had to be a mind reader, which is something that I rarely try to do, I'd say it has to do with that citizenship initiative that's coming out of A&M right now.
Well, and yet, I want to talk to you a little bit about what's going on at A&M. We are just down the street from the University of Austin, which just this week announced that they are going to do entirely merit-based admissions. If you've got a certain score on the SAT, the ACT, or the CDI, is it the CDI? You can get into the program. But one of the things that the president of the University of Austin says with your skills that they have to teach their students, and they've got a pretty cerebral group of students up there, is how to make a cold phone call. You're talking about testifying before City Hall. They're back to how do you deal with people if you're not on email? So tell me a little bit about A&M. You're at the Bush School
yes.
at A&M. So is that can you make a
I think
phone
Aggies
call
are.
and get into
I think Aggies are a pretty special group. And Sheriff, you invited me to bash TU. I'm happy to do it. It's sort of our love language at Aggie Land, and certainly those are some types of skills that everyone needs to know. But if I had to answer for every Aggie at A&M, I think they know how to use their cell phones. Trust me, they're on them plenty. And so, it
but
does...
to make a cold call, it's University of Austin, not the University of Texas. University of Austin. But I'm asking you as a Gen Xer, what about these basic communication skills? Where do you see in working on, trying to get people ready to go to city council when from everything I'm reading, many guys can't even ask people for a date?
Well, hasn't been a problem of mine, but that is, I think, one of the symptoms of the cultural malaise that we have in the United States. there is a sense of, I think, generalized anxiety, and my prescription has always been, if you don't know how to swim, get thrown into the pool. That's how I learned when I was 5 and 6. And when it comes to essential skills like making cold calls or sending a professional email, the best way that anyone can learn is by practicing. No one is an expert communicator the first time they open their mouth. I don't know any 2-year-olds out there that are great orators yet, but many do become. So that is just you have to do the repetitions, and it is disheartening that at certain universities you see, and we have to get back to the basics. But getting back to the basics is acknowledging something needs to be done.
Well, and now how did that happen for you? I mean, you come in, you're Ben Crockett, you've got a legendary lineage in Texas, and so we're buying that. But like, why are you at the Bush School? What moved you to do that? I mean, I can tell my own story. I mean, people often ask me, I did a whole career in politics, been in politics for 40 years. But when I was growing up in a small town in Oklahoma, my father was the mayor. Yeah. There was never any question as I became an adult about being involved. That's what you did. You did work with the community. What's your story?
Well, I wish I would have brought my coonskin cap since the lineage got a shout out. But the Bush School in particular, I was probably 11 years old, and they've always been, particularly the Bush Library, very involved with the community. And they invited local kids to play the piano at their annual hanging of the greens. Now, I'm an awful pianist, and I would never play for you simply because it would be a great embarrassment. But as a 12-year-old or 11-year-old kid, you're full of confidence, vim, and vigor. And so I was asked to play the piano at the Bush School, and I see this gentleman rolling by me. At that point, H.W. Bush was in a wheelchair, and he gives me a little thumbs up. He's, good work, keep at it. And I asked my dad after the event, I said, who's that? And he said, well, that's the former president of these United States, George H.W. Bush. And that's sort of where my fascination with the Bush School started. And I knew from somewhat early on, I want to go there. They're doing something different than other places in this country. One quote that
So you're from an Aggie family?
From an Aggie family, going back really to the Second World War on both sides.
That is a great story. I mentioned to you the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, FIRE.
Yes.
Very visible. They've got 2 pieces in the A&M story recently. They sued A&M for the Regents canceling the Draggieland show, and they won a restraining order on that. I don't know what you think about that. But also they found in their newest survey, which was just done in December of last year, that while at the University of Texas, your nemesis, the ratio of liberals to conservatives on campus is 4-to-1. This is students. But at at Texas A&M, it's 50-50. And that's been a bit of a change. What do you think? You talked a little bit about change. What's happening at A&M that would make the campus population look a bit more like the Texas population?
Well, it's a great indicator when high school students and their parents of differing political backgrounds all say, Texas A&M is the place that I need to go. If I was a parent and I was, where should my son go for their college education if they're able to? I'd want them to go to a place like Texas A&M where you have a wide range of viewpoints within the student population. You want your higher educational centers to be microcosms in many ways. In many ways they are microcosms of larger society. And it would concern me if there were, to every one conservative 4 liberals. But having such a even balance, I think, enables students, and this has been my own experience, at A&M I've never felt like I couldn't express an opinion. I've always felt like I could say what I thought on an issue. And there would be people that would disagree with me, but there would also be folks that agreed with me, and these were in very even proportions. That's how you promote healthy discourse. It's by having those different viewpoints come together and be able to have a conversation. When you have, tiny groups of conservatives or tiny groups of liberals, it can be difficult to promote that sort of exchange of ideas. But at A&M, I've always felt like I'm on an equal footing with everyone else here, and everyone else has to work to substantiate their ideas in the classroom and beyond. And there's plenty of opportunities for them to join left, right, and center-leaning organizations if they really want to be interested in politics and be a little bit of a political junkie like I am and many of my peers are.
So you said when we were talking before that in the last year, is that a good timeline, that there's been an expansion of events at A&M that focused on civil discourse. Tell me about the process, because you were there, have been there at the time. So,
and this is, I'm a little bit disheartened that I'm graduating. I'm glad to be graduating and going out into the workforce. And what do you do with a political science degree? You just hope to avoid unemployment. And if that doesn't work, it's law school. But it's really been amazing how over the past year, and I know going into the next year, we're going to be having events. I want to say Kevin McCarthy is coming up in a few weeks. But across the board and across the political spectrum, we're seeing more and more free speech style events where you have two speakers that maybe have slightly different views, or you have a very critical interlocutor that's going to ask tough questions of a conservative that comes to campus or a liberal that comes to campus, or it doesn't even need to be so political. It could be about history or economics.
Very political.
Yes. But to the 21, 22-year-old student, we oftentimes don't realize the underlying politicalization of history. We just we read the book. And so that's why it's great to get that exposure. And they've made a real effort to promote that. We have a few different groups that have been working hard. In particular, I think of MSC Wiley. Many years ago, we had a thing called Great Ideas or Great Issues, and it was within the Memorial Student Center. And we're now starting to bring that back through things like Aggie Agora, which we've talked a little bit about beforehand, which is a program that we think is coming back, and I'm really excited for. Agora is Greek for marketplace, and I'm sure that there's someone in your audience that is a Greek scholar that could correct my faulty ancient Greek, but what that really means is let's get people that disagree, and let's let them have a conversation. Let students raise questions. Let members of the community raise questions to these folks, and if nothing else, that exposure, and through those tough conversations, I think we get better solutions.
I think, and that's an idea that is maybe getting a teeny tiny bit of traction. I mean, I was it'll be interesting to see Bill Maher went to Mar-a-Lago. Nobody's been more critical of Trump than Bill Maher, and nobody's been more critical of Bill Maher than Trump. So that's interesting. So it may be an idea that its time has come. Before I want to get back to your 4 pillars, but I want to ask you, you have this odd title to me, Chief of Policy in Student Government. What is that? What does that mean?
Well, I don't know if you've worked on political campaigns. I assume you have done quite a few. And one of the things about being on a political campaign is everyone gets a title. Everyone gets a title and a letter of recommendation. There's a little bit of inflation there, but what I do is we have 3,000 students in our organization.
And 3,000 students in
student government.
And at the Bush School.
Well, no. At student government at A&M. We have about 3,000 students in student government, and then we have we represent about 80,000 students. We have about 10 to 15% of students actually vote, so you can divide up that representation any way you want. But I oversee about 30 or 40 people that are interested in different aspects of university policy, academic policy, state, local, and even sometimes federal policy. And so that's really my role. It's a lot of how can we make sure we have a coherent message to the administration and the City of Bryan and City of College Station.
And so that's who you advised. The student government advises the administration. Do they advise the faculty? How does that work?
We I think that higher education, public higher education, really there's two groups you think about. You think about taxpayers and students, and public higher education is supposed to benefit taxpayers, and we do that through a number of different ways as a university, and also students. Those are the folks that are going to get a degree and go out and contribute to the economy, and hopefully do amazing things for the state of Texas. And so as a student government, we sort of see our role as listening to the pulse of what students are interested in, what do they want to see. A great example of that right now is we have a bill before the Land and Resource Management Committee that looks at certain housing issues. Housing is very expensive for college students. It's actually the second highest and fastest growing cost of higher education today. And then we also do things on the university side. An example of that is we're pushing for digital IDs right now. And if you think about it, it's really a cost-saving measure. Printing out thousands of physical IDs that have a card in them, when most individuals between the ages of 18 and 24 have an iPhone or an Android that has the capacity to do many of those ID style functions. So some of it's really nitty-gritty like that, and then other things are just broadly what are students interested in? And students are interested in hearing a lot of different ideas, and they're interested in how do I engage in this political process that we talk so much about? What does that look like?
So Texans invest billions in higher education. I don't have the percentage for Texas A&M, but sometimes they look, we had the fight last summer where the provost went through and found and wanted to get rid of 50 classes because nobody was enrolling in them. Some of those classes were LGBTQ classes. So there was a lot of hoopla there, and the regent said, there's no ROI in these classes. And so that's what the public sees. What would you say to them if there's, and you're paying tuition too?
Yes.
I'm assuming
tuition and fees.
Yeah. So you and parents are paying tuition, which are not small. How can we justify this investment, $1 billion investment, which Texans are making, that's made in A&M since the Morrill Act, as you point out? How do you justify that?
Well, really, for me, it comes down to the product. And I've always thought that the students are the product. And what do you want that product to be able to do? And I think it comes down to two keys. First, they need to be competent citizens of the state of Texas and of the United States. That is my word of the day. And then second, they need to have a specialized vocation, or they need to have some sort of training that prepares them to be economically successful. When our students are economically successful, the state of Texas is economically successful. They buy homes, that tax base expands. But it's more than just being good taxpayers. It's also about, so do they know how to get involved? I mean, know what? My dad, when I was little, he would always go to Rotary. And there's many great Rotarians out there. But when I look at my generation, what are those bonds of civic friendship that you might find in Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America? And that's what being a good citizen is partially about, is you graduate from college. Are you getting involved in your community? Are you helping out at the local food bank? Do you even know that there's an obligation of being a citizen? I don't really think that as citizens we have the option of giving back. I think we have a responsibility to do so.
And you're arguing that this is not something that's lost because so many of our institutions, parenting is different. So many of our institutions, like Rotary, is these things die out. Kind of our churches, church membership. It's almost like one of our former CEO here and Aggie grad, Brooke
Yes.
Rollins, really exemplified that in her hearing to be confirmed as Secretary of Agriculture. This is what
Yes.
This is what I'm bringing.
And when you look at A&M in particular, our students are getting involved in those things. And they're, for example, there's a great organization called the 12th Can, and there are thousands of students that contribute and that benefit from that food bank. There's opportunities. We have 1,300 student organizations. That has to be one of the highest numbers in the state among institutions of higher education, and it probably is because we're the biggest. That tells me that there is a real desire to get involved in those sorts of things. I'm sure Brooke might call it the other education, which is, in fact, I heard her talk and she used that phrase. I got a great education at Texas A&M, but I also got the other education, and that's that involvement component. And it's how are we looking at the service that students are doing. Can we track that? Do we know? We have the largest single-day service project in the nation, the big event. But what's the data on all of these different programs and projects? And what me and Sid were discussing just last week was this Citizenship and Service Initiative. And one of the main challenges that we see is students are self-selecting to take these incredible courses that teach American history, for example, and they are getting involved in internships at the state and federal level, and they're giving back to their community and their state, and they're really putting in an incredible amount of volunteer hours. But there's not a centralized hub, be it a website or a center that really puts that all together in a nice package. And if you're a student like me and you're interested in politics and policy, A&M had great opportunities for me, but I had to sort of seek those out. I had to do a little bit of hunting. I had to do a little bit of, a little more than a little bit of research to say, so what classes should I take if I'm interested in this? It's that curation and that intentionality that we think this initiative, the Citizenship and Service Initiative, will really bring to A&M's campus, which if you're a parent at home thinking, where should my son or daughter go? I think it should be a place that is intentional in making a difference in the lives of others, but also a place that has as its stated goal making great citizens.
Well, answer me this. I worked and TPPF worked very hard on eliminating DEI from our campuses. Yeah. But we did not want to eliminate the programs that would raise the level of participation for minority and marginalized students. Do you think, which keep coming back, the numbers are not good. They're not good at A&M. They're not good at UT. Do you think, how does what you're doing help so that if you have a kid that comes in, that they're going to feel welcome? How does your programs work with that?
It's a terribly difficult thing, and as someone who's not from a marginalized or underserved community, who doesn't have a disadvantaged background, who's not a first-generation college student, it's difficult for me to say, how would I feel if I were them? What would my needs be? That being said, I would just like to spotlight, I think, one particular class that, if you're concerned about what is my student learning at A&M, which is slightly tangential, but if I could spotlight just one, it's had to be Bush 141, which is a course that every freshman at the Bush School has to take, and soon we think that that's going to spread across campus, where every student will have the opportunity, and then hopefully eventually every student will take this course. And what Bush 141 is the first week your readings are from Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America. Your next week is John Locke's Second Treatise of Government, and then you read the Declaration of Independence, and you read Frederick Douglass's What to the Slave is the 4th of July, and then you get Abraham Lincoln and Judge Douglas, the Lincoln-Douglas debates, and you get selections from there. And if I was a parent at home, that's exactly the types of courses that I would want my son or daughter to be in. Ones that I think we do a great disservice across the nation to every young mind that we don't furnish with the beauty of our history. We have a beautiful tapestry of American history. I think it's finer than any Persian rug. And if we're not teaching these things intentionally, and if we're not equipping them with the skills that they need to be effective in the workplace and the state, I really do worry about our future. And that's why I'm so grateful that A&M is taking a real hard look at what we're doing and what gaps need to be filled, and how can we bring that together in a comprehensive package that is great for the community.
So it's evaluating what is a degree of value.
Yes.
How are you getting a degree of value? Well, now tell me, let's return as we wrap up to your Citizenship and Service Committee, and where are we on the trajectory of that? How will that work?
So that's a great question, and I'm sure I could give a lecture at this point. We've done hundreds of meetings on it, and we recently finished up a summit that had about 100 community stakeholders. So the Sol Ross Group, for example, was there, the foundation, the association, different deans and vice chancellors. And really that was just an opportunity to get down to the brass tacks of, so what are we actually doing? And we have it organized around those 4 main pillars that I mentioned earlier of character, knowledge, skills, civic engagement. But the foundation is very important. It's conceptual frameworks. You have to build your house. And the conceptual framework is based on the Morrill Act.
And tell people what that is.
So 1862, Senator Morrill had tried this idea in the 1850s. It didn't pass. And everyone says today, we're more divided than ever. We're more polarized than ever. Really? Are we? Go back to 1862. This is right before the Battle of Antietam. The nation is at civil war, and his solution, in part, his long-term planning is the Morrill Act, and that's where we get all the land grant institutions. And his idea was, we need folks to know what it is to be an American. And we need them to have certain skills so they can be productive in the workforce. And 20 years after it passed, Abraham Lincoln signed it into law. I want to say it was the early fall of 1862. 20 years later, he's reflecting on his life, and he's asked, what's your greatest achievement? And he says, it's my hope that my fellow countrymen have become better prepared to serve as a bulwark of Republican liberty. And that to me symbolizes what land-grant universities are for. It's that preparation in citizenship, and that is one of the quotes that we used as the foundation of this program. We used it in the presentation that we presented to the Board of Regents a few months ago. What are we trying to do? What's the product that we want to make? And it's being deeply rooted in our history, equipped with those essential skills that we've talked about. But skills and knowledge aren't enough if you don't have the appreciation for the American experiment. We talk about Aristotelian values, Aristotelian Republican virtues. If you're not willing to go out there and actually do something when you graduate, maybe it's run for public office, maybe it's volunteer with a local food bank, or join something like Rotary, then we haven't really done our job. And this initiative is, okay, let's bring it all together. How do we give that to students? How do we ensure that when you walk across that stage, the watermark of your degree is I'm a great citizen and I'm ready to serve my country.
Absolutely. You know, what we've seen in the battle against DEI is that it is, if you look at the website for the National Association of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Officers in Higher Ed, which is
Yes.
quite an acronym, their goal is to reteach history. And to make sure that people understand what they believe is endemic to our country, which is this systemic racism and inequity and oppression. And so what I hear you saying is going the other direction.
It's not enough to call out bad programs or bad ideas. I mean, you know, I can sit in the bleachers all day and, you know, call a foul. We were talking about sports earlier, and so now I'm in dangerous territory. I'm not a massive sports fan, unfortunately. Go A&M, go Aggies. But you also have to advance a positive vision, I think, for the future, and you have to be willing to push those programs, projects, and ideas that are really transformative. And so we could sit and, as I've done many times, say, look what the circus of monkeys are doing. Or we could become ringleaders.
Great. Ben, thanks so much for coming in today and appearing on the Sherry Sylvester Show. It was great to see the next step. As you say, I do a lot of complaining about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but how we formulate the reverse, how we move back to a place where people understand what a privilege and it is to be in America, what it's taken us to get here, how far we've come, and how much more we have to do. It's really great work that you're doing at A&M.
Well, thank you for having me.
And thank you all for joining us on the Sherry Sylvester Show. You can get the podcast on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to sign up for my newsletter, Ninth in Congress, you can go to the TPPF website, www.texaspolicy.com, Ninth in Congress.